It was just another regular afternoon. I was walking down the familiar streets of my neighborhood, lost in my own thoughts, when I reached a crosswalk near a small park. The traffic light was red, and a few people stood waiting to cross. That's when I noticed him. An elderly man stood near the curb, leaning slightly on a wooden cane. His clothes were old-fashioned, but neat, dark trousers, a buttoned-up coat, and a flat cap pulled low over his forehead. He seemed hesitant, his eyes scanning the moving traffic as if unsure whether to step forward. Something about him felt off. Not in a dangerous way, but in a way that made me instinctively stop and watch. The other pedestrians didn't seem to pay him any attention. As the light turned green, people began crossing, but the old man remained frozen in place. I hesitated for a moment before stepping toward him. "Sir, do you need help?" I asked. He turned his head slightly, looking up at me. His eyes were pale, almost colorless, and filled with something I couldn't quite place. Relief? Sadness? Gratitude? "Thank you, son," he said in a quiet, trembling voice. I gently took his arm, guiding him across the street. His grip was light, his skin cool to the touch. We walked slowly, each step measured, the sounds of the city buzzing around us. When we reached the other side, he let go of my arm and smiled, a small, weary smile. "You're very kind," he said softly. Before I could respond, he gave me a small nod and turned toward the park. I watched as he walked away, his figure disappearing among the trees. I didn't think much of it at the time. At least, not until I saw the missing person poster a few minutes later. And on it, his face. I stood frozen in front of the poster, my heart pounding. The old man's face stared back at me. Same deep wrinkles, same pale eyes, same flat cap. The words beneath his picture made my stomach drop. Missing since 1984. My eyes darted back to the park where I had last seen him. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their shadows stretching across the pavement, but the old man was nowhere to be seen. I read the rest of the poster, my hands growing clammy. His name was Albert Connors. He had vanished nearly 40 years ago, last seen on this very street. That was impossible. I had just spoken to him. I had touched his arm. He was real. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I glanced around, half expecting someone to be watching me, but the world moved on as if nothing strange had happened. People walked past me. Cars honked in the distance. The city continued as normal. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was just someone who looked like him. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the poster. Then, with one last look toward the park, I started walking again, my mind racing. I needed to know more. That night, as I sat on my bed, I searched for Albert Connors online. A few old newspaper clippings surfaced. Local man mysteriously disappears after leaving work. No leads in decades-old case. Family still seeks answers. There was even an old, grainy photograph. It was him, the same man I had helped. I felt the hair on my arms rise. I scrolled further, my breath catching in my throat as I read another detail I had somehow missed before. Witnesses last saw Albert standing at that exact crosswalk, hesitating, just like today. And then he was gone, vanished into thin air, just like he did today. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Albert's face, those weary, knowing eyes staring at me as if he wanted to say something more. The newspaper articles, the missing person poster, the way he had simply disappeared, it all circled in my mind like an unsolved puzzle. By morning, I knew I couldn't just forget about it. I needed answers. I decided to visit the local library, hoping to dig up anything else about Albert Connors. The record section smelled of aged paper and dust, and the librarian, a kind elderly woman, helped me find old news archives. I scrolled through microfilm until I found the original article from 1984. Local man disappears without a trace, last seen at the Main Street crosswalk. That was exactly where I had met him. The article mentioned that Albert was a factory worker, unmarried, and described as a quiet but friendly man. But the part that made my blood run cold was a witness statement from the time. I saw him standing there like he was waiting for something. I turned away for just a second, and when I looked back, he was gone. No sound, no movement. Just gone. It was exactly what had happened yesterday. I sat back in my chair, rubbing my temples. None of this made sense. How could a man disappear in the same way, in the same place, almost 40 years apart? And if Albert had vanished in 1984, how had I seen him, touched him, spoken to him? The librarian passed by and noticed the article I was reading. She peered over my shoulder and frowned. "That's an old mystery," she said softly. "People around here still talk about it. Some say his ghost lingers at that crosswalk, trying to get home." A chill crept up my spine. Ghost. She nodded. Not everyone believes it, of course. But over the years, a few people claim to have seen him. Always an old man, always confused, always vanishing when they look away. I gripped the table, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. I had spoken to a man who wasn't supposed to exist. And if the stories were true, he might still be out there. The weight of what I had just learned pressed down on me. If Albert Connors had vanished in 1984 and had been seen by others over the years, then what had I really encountered yesterday? A ghost? A lost soul trapped in time? I wasn't sure I believed in ghosts, but I couldn't deny what I had seen with my own eyes. I had to go back. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and a thin layer of fog settled over the streets, I made my way back to the crosswalk where I had first met Albert. The area was eerily quiet. A few distant streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across the pavement. I stood there, staring at the spot where he had been. I half expected to see him appear again, shuffling toward me with that same lost expression. But the street was empty. I took a deep breath and whispered, "Albert, are you still here?" At first, nothing happened. Just the distant hum of a car somewhere in the city. But then, a cold gust of wind rushed past me, carrying a faint whisper. It wasn't a voice, not exactly. More like the sensation of words forming in my mind, just on the edge of understanding. My skin prickled. I turned, scanning the area. The fog thickened around the street lamp ahead, swirling unnaturally. And then, a shadow. A figure stood just at the edge of the light. An old man. My breath caught. "Albert." I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching me. But something was different this time. He looked sad, like he was waiting for something. I took a hesitant step forward. "What do you want?" The wind picked up again, swirling leaves across the pavement. And then, just like before, he was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just an empty street. But this time, something was left behind. A small, folded piece of paper lay at my feet. My hands shook as I bent down and picked it up. The paper was old, yellowed, and fragile. And on it, in faded ink, were just 3 words. "Help me home." I stared at the paper in my trembling hands. Help me home. What did it mean? Where was home? Was this a plea from beyond the grave? Or had I fallen into some strange, waking nightmare? I knew I couldn't just walk away. Not now. There was only one place that made sense. I rushed back to the library, ignoring the growing chill in the air. The old newspaper article had mentioned Albert Connor's last known address, a house just a few blocks from where I had first met him. By the time I reached the street, the fog had thickened, wrapping around the houses like ghostly fingers. The house stood at the very end, dark and forgotten. The windows were boarded up, the paint peeling away in long, jagged strips. It had been abandoned for years. I hesitated at the gate. My heart pounded as I stepped forward and pushed it open. The creaking sound echoed through the night. "Albert," I whispered. A sudden gust of wind swept past me, rattling the old wooden door. Then, slowly, impossibly, it creaked open on its own. I swallowed hard and stepped inside. Dust filled the air, and the faint scent of mildew clung to the walls. My flashlight flickered as I moved through the empty rooms. Faded wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing the skeleton of the house beneath. Then, in the center of the living room, I saw it. A photograph. It was propped up on a small wooden table, untouched by time. I picked it up with shaking fingers. It was a black and white portrait of Albert Connors, standing in front of this very house, smiling. And beneath it, a note in the same handwriting as the paper I found earlier. I never made it home. A shiver crawled down my spine. Suddenly, the air in the room changed. The temperature dropped, my breath turning into mist. The wind outside howled, rattling the house, and then, a whisper. Not in my head this time. Not just a feeling. A real voice, barely more than a breath. Thank you. I turned sharply, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. But the room was empty. The air grew still. The house silent. I didn't know how, but I felt it. Albert was gone. Finally, after all these years, he had found his way home. I set the photograph back on the table and walked out into the night. The fog was clearing.